Laurence Fox. The answer to the question, what if Benedict Cumberbatch, an earthworm Jim's love child, was a sour, chain-smoking, failed actor turned failed politician turned failed broadcaster turned successful, unemployed conspiracy freak? Whether it's his acting, political, or his musical performances, he's shown both fans and critics alike that his talents truly have no beginning. Today we're going to take a look at the life and times of Laurence Fox, and perhaps we'll uncover why, despite inflation soaring, debts rising, children starving at school, and the NHS being in virtual collapse, his greatest political ambition is to be anti-woke. Laurence was born in Leeds in 1978 to his mother Mary and actor James Fox. His brother is Robin Fox, a film producer. His younger siblings, Lydia and Jack Fox, are also actors. His uncle is an actor, granddad was an actor, and at least two of his cousins are actors. The ability to act is in his blood, I say. Unless a man might point out that acting is essentially lying for money, but not me. He attended Harrow School, a private school, which means that your child can go there for a small fee of Jesus Christ. He explains in The Telegraph, which I had to sign up for by the way, you're welcome, that he fucking hated school, which, fair enough. He spoke about the fact that he was horribly bullied by the older boys, making his life a misery. And why wouldn't it? We all understand the impact of bullying and how it can drive people to depression, anxiety, and can lead people to make very life-ending choices. I know we all feel like he's a bit of a thick cunt now, but I can't help but acknowledge the pain that he was put through then, Anyway, Laurence was prevented from getting a place at any university because of a report written by Harrow School outlining his extensive history of bullying. As in, being a bully. As in, causing somebody an undue amount of physical or emotional pain without cause. This is a good example of what I would call character evidence. In this case, it's evidence that he's a complete cunt. When he couldn't secure a university placement, he went on to be a gardener, hated it, then an office worker, hated it, then decided to leave the world of being a normal person and follow in the family business. He applies and, with no thanks at all to nepotism, gets accepted into the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, one of the most esteemed acting schools in the country. And so, he learned acting. Wherefore art thou Romeo? What's in the box? Time to let off some steam, Bennett. All the classics. Whether he was starring in The Hole as a whinging posh twat, or Whatever Love Means as a royal posh twat, or Gosford Park as a whinging royal posh twat, you've got to admit, the guy's got range. If Christian Bale wasn't the Christian Bale of his generation, he'd be the Christian Bale of his generation. He's probably most notable for his role in the Inspector Morse spin-off, Lewis. In it, he played Detective Inspector James Hathaway, a privately educated Catholic detective. Truly, the Daniel Day-Lewis of Leeds. Anyway, the show ran from 2006 to 2015, was very highly rated, and things were looking good for our mate Loza. He'd even married Billie Piper in 2007. When asked why she decided to marry him, she said, "Because you want to." Sorry. With all that being said, and at the risk of being accused of spoiling the shock twist, it was all pretty much downhill from here. In 2016, he tried his hand as a musician, releasing an album called Holding Patterns via his own record label, Fox Cub Records. Not really my taste, a bit James Blunt without the looks or self-awareness or talent, I suppose. Here's one thing I will say about it though, if I may. At the time of the album's conception, he was going through a divorce with Billie Piper. If you didn't know this to begin with, you'd probably have a bit of an inkling by the end of the album, since it's pretty much what every song is about. My point being that, despite me not necessarily being a fan of his music, I'm more of a Shania Twain man myself, the album was an honest expression of what he was feeling about the most impactful and stressful thing in his life at the time. I say this because his second album, A Grief Observed, is a fucking mental dumpster fire of culture war-infested brain rot, hummed unenthusiastically by a man with far more self-confidence than his talents could ever justify. Here's a snippet of Laurence performing his song The Distance, live on one of our morning TV shows.
They have put something in the water, they seek a cure for the conversation, they stole a march on your indecision. And the first to fall was laughter, just to quell the unoffended. They seek to murder your opinion. So I need you more than ever, and need your hand in this resistance.
Now, as a quick aside, if this video does get 30,000 likes before the new year, I'll personally perform a cover of this song and post it on this channel, so don't forget to like, and while you're at it, subscribe too. If you didn't catch those lyrics, let me remind you. They've put something in the water. They seek a cure for the conversation. They stole a march on your indecision. And the first to fall is laughter, just to quell the long offended. They seek to murder your opinion. I mean, it all sounds quite conspiratorial, doesn't it? They have put something in the water, begging the question, who are they? The government? The progressive global elites? And how are they murdering your opinion? Well, it turns out they are some people on Twitter, and when he says they are murdering your opinion, he means to say that they are arguing against your opinion on a public platform. Not exactly Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, is it? Like I said, his musical evolution maps on pretty well to his personal and political evolution. Here's his story in a nutshell. He got divorced, and rather than sitting around in his free time wanking and playing the Xbox like a normal guy, he started watching anti-woke conspiracy theories and arguing with random divs on Twitter about neo-pronouns. And probably still wanking. He's anti-woke for the same reasons that middle-aged white guys are flat earthers. They want to feel valued, they want to feel part of a community, and they want to feel like they're involved in something bigger than themselves. Some people rally against capitalism, some people take up goat yoga, and some people identify as attack helicopters to own the libs. I get that I've kind of put the cart before the horse here, so let's now take a look at his political life, and I can explain to you why everyone that has ever loved him is wrong. It started in 2020 when Laurence formed his own political party, the Reclaim Party. See, Laurence had just happened to notice, being the intellectual hawk that he is, that some people believe things that he disagrees with. When asked why he's wasting his time and money with this stupid bollocks, he gave the usual reasons. Politicians are out of touch, family values, trans people are shit, blah blah blah. Nothing about taxes, schools, the cost of living, austerity, the military budget, housing, the NHS, the trade deficit, but I suppose all that stuff is secondary to the fact that some people on Twitter want different pronouns. In 2021, he announces that he will be standing in the London mayoral election in order to fight against extreme political correctness. He did this by, and I can see why this might have been intuitive, being extremely incorrect politically. And if there's one good thing I can say about our Loz, it's that he's not afraid to fail, and nowhere is this fearlessness more evident than his political career. Wait, can you call it a political career if you never get hired? Fuck it, let's roll with it for now. When asked for any specific policies, political insights, or anything of any value at all, he could only spit out monologues about how the Neapolitan Police Service, or whatever they're called, are obsessed with diversity and inclusivity. This all, bear in mind, is coming from a former actor that ditched his career to form a political party and run for mayoral office specifically and solely because of diversity and inclusivity. His run for office was supported by the likes of Reform UK and Nigel Farage, and funded by the businessman Jeremy Hosking. He's the guy that donated £1.7 million to Vote Leave in 2016, and has otherwise been a steadfast supporter of the bile-inducing dumpster fire that is Brexit. All that was for absolute tit all, though, because Laurence finished in 6th place with 1.9% of the vote, ultimately losing out to a YouTube pranker. At least, I think that's what they were shouting, and proving beyond all doubt that he's about as viable a choice for mayor as Liam Payne is for the 2028 Olympic diving team. Cut to May 2023, and the Reclaim Party gains its first MP, Andrew Bridgen. Andrew had spent his career as a Conservative politician until he was suspended from the party in January 2023 for, drumroll please, spreading COVID conspiracies and comparing the use of COVID vaccines to the Holocaust. I'm sure that was a wild turn nobody at all saw coming. It's worth noting that, despite eventually opposing Boris Johnson for his breach of COVID lockdown restrictions, he was also found to be breaching parliamentary standards for lobbying on behalf of a company that was paying him and donating gifts to him. He even tried to bribe the commissioner investigating him, so we can all agree that this is a morally bereft lump of cat shit floating in a mostly unremarkable pool of political piss water. Nevertheless, by December 2023, he decided to leave the party in order to move forward as an independent for the 2024 general election. Just so we can see this point through, despite steadily increasing his majority vote share since 2010, he finished second to last with just 3.2% of the vote, confirming that the success he saw in previous elections was almost entirely due to him being Conservative rather than him being Andrew Bridgen. You love to see it. So the Reclaim Party were back to a sum total of 0 MPs. No matter, because our mate Loza Foxy Fox had a cunning plan. See, he was going to run for London Mayor in 2024. I mean, sure, he lost in 2021 with less than 2% of the vote, but it's still all to play for and his stock has only gone up. Unless you look at, data or opinions. Unfortunately, he handed in his paperwork quite literally hours before the deadline, and it was rejected because it contained too many errors. Also, they don't accept applications written in crayon. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal. They just let you know there are a few mistakes and you need to correct them, no biggie. But because he was such a complacent streak of wet piss, he didn't have any more time to submit any amendments. When he was asked what the fuck happened and how he managed to completely fuck the whole thing up, he said that his team had reviewed the document several times, and this was clearly a case of political corruption. Because apparently the Liberal elites allowed the Conservative Susan Hall to run along with candidates from Reform UK and Britain First, but had no choice but to resort to outright corruption to prevent the intellectual titan Laurence Fox decisively securing another 1.9% of the vote. In light of the fact that he completely fucked up running for mayor, he shifted focus and decided to announce his candidacy for the London Assembly election. Interestingly, he chose not to represent Reclaim Party, the political party he created, and received just 0.56% of the vote. He didn't get elected, obviously, and made himself look like a complete twat, obviously. So that's about the extent of his illustrious political career, but it's important to note that this all happened alongside his efforts as a broadcaster. I sense you might know where I'm going with this, but for those that don't understand the life cycle of your average right-wing anti-woke ball bag, he joined GB News in November of 2022. His show was really... how do I say it? Shit. It feels like every monologue he writes has been run through ChatGPT to make him sound more profound, and it's just hard to take it seriously. I mean, who starts a speech like this?
We are entering the age of the consensus. As facts are subsumed in feelings and empirical truth becomes inconvenient, irritant to progressive ideology, with nothing rational, reasonable or quantifiable to back up their ever more ludicrous claims, the woke left huddle together and form a mighty consensus.
Or this.
At what juncture can an individual realistically assess that they are no longer living in a free society? At what point do humans cease their relentless march up and down the hills of life and say, here, I will die here, on this hill?
He's given the most Orwellian, nihilistic speeches since Oppenheimer invented the atom or whatever fucking nerd shit he did. It begs the question, who enjoys this? Who is spending their spare time watching this? Christ. Anyway, he would talk about the leading issues of the day, like does bisexuality exist and should we ban awareness months? You know, the things that all great campaigners for freedom have asked. He complains that the dictionary is being written by beta males while also looking like he hands out Mormonism pamphlets on his way to disc golf. This was all until September of 2023 when he appeared on the segment of the showbiz journalist and sentient veneer Dan Wootton. After chewing the fat about what it's like to be alphas, they started to talk about comments made by capital J journalist Ava Evans. Now, bear in mind that what you're about to hear from Laurence is in response to Ava saying that she's not really sure that a minister for men's mental health is strictly necessary in government.
We're past the watershed, so I can say this. Show me a single self-respecting man that would like to climb into bed with that woman, ever. Ever. Who wasn't an incel, who wasn't a cucked little incel. That little woman has been fed, spoon-fed oppression day after day after day after day, starting with the lie of the gender wage gap. And she sat there and I'm going like, if I met you in a bar and that was like sentence 3, chances of me just walking away are just huge. We need powerful, strong, amazing women who make great points for themselves. We don't need these sort of feminist 4.0. They're pathetic and embarrassing. Who'd want to shag that?
Okay, so let's linger on this for a second, because I think it's easy to kind of shrug this off as Laurence being a completely pathetic, gutless weasel, which he obviously is, but this is a sort of defining difference between Laurence and, with respect, someone with a brain. When I first watched the original clip on the BBC, I strongly disagreed with Ava's opinions on men's mental health. I've linked to a Politics Joe video in the description that plays the full context of her conversation on the BBC panel, but I agree that she comes across as trying to wad about the issue of male suicide. With that being said, on second viewing it's clear that she is asked specifically about whether or not there should be a minister in government specifically to represent mental health for men. She thinks it would be better placed to have, if anything, a Minister for Mental Health, to represent all aspects of the mental health crisis in the UK, including raising awareness for the issues men face. With that understanding, I agree with Ava. And look, even if I didn't agree with her, I would raise an objection on the basis of fact, not attacking her in an emotional outburst like a petulant, nasal little snowflake, because that's what SJW beta cucks do, Laurence. Remember? Laurence didn't raise the fact that the biggest killer of men under 50 in the UK is suicide. Laurence didn't raise the fact that around 3/4 of the suicides registered in the UK are men. That's because Laurence doesn't care about anything substantive around this issue. He just cares about the aesthetic of being anti-woke and fighting against the feminism. If he actually cared, he would diminish her position by actually addressing her opinion rather than just saying he wouldn't shag her, as if that means anything at all coming from a man that looks like a homeless, middle-aged, alcoholic Draco Malfoy.
You wait till my father hears about this.
As a result, Laurence was fired from GB News. He made an apology video that was actually quite honest and decent, until he did a bit of a Tommy Robinson and started talking about how he's actually just being used as a scapegoat and that the treatment towards him is unfair. Since that's the case, I'll say the same thing to Laurence that I said to that shameless coke fiend as well. You aren't a victim here, Laurence. You decided to say something that was, even by your own admission, distasteful, and people disliked it and called you out for it. You acted like a cunt, and you got treated like a cunt. You fucked around, and you found out. So that's it, right? Well, no, not really. We haven't even talked about COVID yet. See, when he got sick with COVID in January 2022, he ended up taking the conspiracy theorists' go-to drug. Smack. No, wait, ivermectin. Sorry, I meant ivermectin. In this instance, at least. For those of you that don't know, ivermectin is a medicine that is used to treat both humans and animals for worms and occasionally head lice and stuff. There is, and I cannot stress this enough, absolutely zero clinical literature that suggests ivermectin would be relevant for the treatment of COVID. When he says that he does his own research, he doesn't mean that he's running his own clinical trials, or exercising that doctorate in medical science he's had in the back pocket just in case actin didn't pan out. He means that he's reading anything written by people that don't like the World Health Organization and just kind of running with that. The difference is that one appears to be backed by clinical trials performed by lots of people with lots of fancy degrees and produce peer-reviewed data, and the others go on the Joe Rogan Experience to tell Joe that they personally took ivermectin and everything panned out fine. Also, no, they haven't eaten elk meat, Joe, you fucking nerd. Jesus Christ. If you're wondering how well regarded Laurence Fox's medical opinions are amongst qualified actual real-life medical doctors, you need only look at this interview he did on GB News with a qualified actual real-life medical doctor. Roll the clip. Always wanted to say that.
Also with me is Dr. Bharat Pankhania, Senior Clinical Lecturer at University of Exeter Medical School. Good evening. What are your thoughts on what you're hearing, Doctor?
I sometimes wonder why you exist, to be honest with you, because a lot of these things that you spew out just send things that are worrisome to people, not verified, not factual. You just have your own agenda, and that's what I think. You are just spewing out your biased views. That's how I feel about you.
So, not the best impression, apparently? Now look, I don't want to relitigate the entirety of COVID here. God knows there's enough information out there if people wanted to know anything at all about it, but it never fails to amaze me how you can predict how people like Laurence feel about any subject at all from the single self-identifier of being anti-woke. I mean, be honest, if you didn't know who he was before this video, does the fact that he's a COVID skeptic that thinks lockdowns are a breach of your freedoms surprise you at all? Or does it 100% map onto the belief system of every other anti-woke campaigner you've ever interacted with? Like, I'm anti-woke in the sense that I think you're a terminally online loser if you obsess over neo-pronouns and policing the words people use without consideration of the context, but that goes both ways. If you write several posts a day on Twitter obsessing about whether somebody shared a pride flag and you get angry when a drag queen turns you on, you're also a sado, virgin, loser nerd that needs some fresh air. Which reminds me, drag queens. On the 25th of April this year, Laurence was ordered to pay a total of £180,000 to two people, one of which is a drag queen, after referring to them as pedos. It all went down on Twitter, obviously, after Sainsbury's announced they introduced safe spaces for black employees in some branches. Laurence, being somebody who doesn't think race is a big deal and thinks businesses should do whatever they like without social pushback, was predictably furious. He tweeted that he won't be shopping there again and encouraged his followers to boycott them too. In response, the two people involved in the lawsuit tweeted at him implying that it was a weird racist thing to get hung up on, and the Lozmeister fired back with, essentially, fuck off pedo. They sued him for defamation and won. He also countersued a year later on account of the fact that they called him racist, but it was dismissed. He was also forced to pay £36,000 in legal fees. When the initial judgment was read, the judge on the case was quoted as saying that he is characterized by impulsiveness, theatricality, a disregard for or uninterest in the impact on others, and an unfastidiousness about objective factuality. That means, in English, he's a lying little cunt that looks like Where's Wally if he was a 50-year-old alcoholic 40-a-day smoker that just ate a pube sandwich. While we're on the subject of Laurence in court, I found a little snippet of the shit that he said to, I suppose, convince the court that he wasn't a weird racist freak. Quote, under cross-examination, Fox suggested that there were contexts in which the phrase, I hate black people, was not racist. He said, if a man is just released from a Ugandan jail where he's been gang-raped by several men, and he walks out and he goes, I hate black people, it's sort of an understandable response. When he was asked whether it was racist to say black people in the UK should go home, Fox replied, depends on what context. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I got literal chills hearing that. I don't think I've heard somebody mend the bridges between the races like that since Dr. King had a dream. Anyway, like I said, he lost the case and was ordered to pay £90,000 in damages to each claimant, and just kind of ended up looking like a complete fucking dickhead. Well, at least he's learned his lesson now, I suppose. Oh wait, July 26th, 2024. During the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympic Games, a group of drag queens reenacted a painting called The Feast of the Gods. It was quite possibly the most aggressively French thing I've ever seen, and it didn't take long for the pearl-clutching facts don't care about your feelings types to get all uppity and offended about it. Laurence, along with several others, thought that the scene was mocking the Last Supper, and as a staunch Christian himself, decided to speak out against it. And by speak out against it, I mean he called everyone involved pedos and childfuckers. Again. On July 28th, the host of Drag Queen France, Nikki Doll, tweeted that they will see him in court, and so I'm sure we can all look forward to him being sued again for being a libelous dickhead. 6 months ago, he also started a show/podcast called Fox and Father, which he hosts with Father Calvin Robinson. That's another guy that was fired from GB News for siding with Laurence about the Ava Evans stuff. He's a Tommy Robinson, we need to fight back against the waves of Muslims kind of guy. He's just a straight-talking bloke that thinks the values of Islam as written in the Quran aren't compatible with British values. Sort of like how the Bible explicitly endorses genocide, teaches you with specific detail how to own and punish slaves, and says that if a man rapes a woman, he needs to pay her father 50 shekels and, as punishment, must marry her and never divorce. Thank Jesus H. Christ we have such moral men like Father Robinson amongst us to teach us that there is a world of difference between the Bible and the Quran. And so, here we are. At the time of writing, Tommy Robinson has just been arrested and held in remand until he can attend court in the next week or so, and Laurence is, of course, preaching on Twitter about how Tommy is being held as a political prisoner. Despite being so steadfast in this belief, he's also stated that he will not be attending the protest at Downing Street to demonstrate against this two-tier policing because he doesn't know any of the other speakers. His words, not mine. It'll amuse you then to find out that the speakers are the family and friends of the people that were locked up during the last protest that he supported after the Southport stabbings. This is actual, real-life evidence that he literally hasn't got a clue what the fuck he's talking about. So let's sum this up a bit. We've all got shit to do after all. The only reason that Laurence receives the coverage he does today is solely because of his time as an actor that your mum knows off the telly. After going through a rough divorce, he slipped into the smackhead fever dreams of watching weird alt-right shit on YouTube and ended up garnering headlines for being that bloke off Lewis that suddenly started tweeting about how gay vaccinated frogs don't burn hot enough to melt steel beams. Everything he has ever said about culture and politics exposes the fact that his views are entirely aesthetic. He's never researched anything he talks about, and that doesn't matter one jot to the people he looks to for support, because they don't require it. Their research isn't reading articles or papers or legal documents, it's watching Tim Pool or reading a Tommy Robinson tweet or watching people like Laurence Fox and Calvin Nobbinson on GB News. After all, they wouldn't lie, would they? Lying is what the woke mainstream media does. I know, because these guys told me so. The reality that we can all take solace in is that regardless of the views Laurence garners on Twitter and Facebook, this absolutely does not apply to the real world. He's alienated production companies by relentlessly attacking them for being part of the woke agenda. He's been thoroughly rejected by every electorate he's ever stood before, and even GB News has written him off as a complete fucking liability. He's about as culturally relevant now as A-line flares with pockets in the knees, and he's going to stay that way until he can get a grip of himself and stop being such a relentlessly thick old cunt. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, it really helps. A huge thank you to my enigmatic and flagrant supporters on Patreon and the members right here on YouTube. If you'd like to support, you can do so from just £1 a month by clicking the link in the description, or if you're a subscriber, you can press join right below this video. Your support genuinely means the world to me. Love you. Bye bye.